Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Show. Coming up, arrivederci Tony Macaroni. There are new owners at the Spaghetti Hat. Say no to fans on the pitch. Is it a good thing? And when you hear this, Inverness will have a new manager. Yes, welcome to another episode of the Scottish Football Show. I am your host, Andrew Slaven. Joining me this week, he's the man from the future. We're recording on Monday night, but it's Tuesday morning where he is. So it'll be Wednesday probably when he gets this out. That's Melbourne City Head of Creative, Findlay Marks. Hello, pal. How you getting on?
Hey. Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad. Waiting on the impending doom of my second child, about to be born any minute.
Oh, it's a very exciting time. What is enjoyable and not to scare you is you think it's just double the amount of work having two kids rather than one. It's not. It's exponentially more. Don't. But I back you to be a success in the new role.
Thanks.
I think you'll do just fine. It's amazing how much of it. This is boring chat for anybody that doesn't have kids. It's amazing how much of it having a second kid, all of the stuff that you remember from first time you'd forgotten comes back as muscle memory. So, yeah.
I hope so. Well, the only difference is, and yes, this is boring on a football chat, but we had a daughter, now we're about to have a boy. So, just worried about the willy, mate. That's, dealing with nappies and all sorts, just the pee in the face. That's, but that's Scottish football for you, isn't it? Sometimes you just have to deal with shit. And sometimes someone pisses in your face. But there you go. Obviously, Laura's not with us for this week. But are you excited for resorting to a beautiful traditional front two this week, Finn, instead of the more, attacking front three?
As a man of my age, I obviously think that 90s football is still the benchmark for all football in terms of kits and everything else. And the classic big man, small man partnership up front, I think, is the way to go. So I'm the big man, isn't it? That's or the stocky wee guy that can't run properly. I was meaning big man, like wide ways. I'm definitely the mercurial masterclass centre forward or number 10 in behind. That'll be me. I'll take that. But let's get stuck into a couple of funnies, Finn. Have you got anything to start us off with? Well, my favourite thing that I saw this week, it seems like it went kind of under the radar, but I really enjoyed it. It was a video of, obviously, Aberdeen were away in Frankfurt last midweek for their Conference League match. And there's a brilliant video of a newlywed couple coming out of a church in the middle of Frankfurt being greeted by hundreds, if not thousands, of Aberdeen fans, chanting and cheering for them. I think the Aberdeen fans had a pretty good time.
That's brilliant.
That's something you kind of won't forget. Yeah, unusual to be serenaded by a throng of Aberdeen fans on your wedding day.
Jeez, oh man, Frankfurt fans. The Frankfurt fan being married. I wonder if they were worried it was Bayern Munich fans outside. I really liked. It was a bit of a niche one. This, but Montrose, who won at the weekend, I think, they posted on Twitter about their defender, Kerr Waddle, coming back. So he came off the bench and just subbed on about the 70th minute and then said, how when they do the little updates on their club pages and stuff, but they spelt his name wrong, which was spotted by Kerr. And it's not just that, it's just Kerr actually responded to the mistake and he said, "Cheers, lads, good spelling of the name. I've only been here for 4 years."
Yeah, that's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? With that stuff, I am paranoid. I think it's maybe because having my name, which has got a D in it, which is unusual for the first name if your name's Findlay, I get really annoyed when people can't use my proper name, like in an email or a text message or whatever, because the thing that blows my mind is quite often people will email me having spelled my name correctly in the email address, obviously, or otherwise I wouldn't have got it, and then spell my name incorrectly in the body of the email, which is just bizarre. So I feel his pain. I think these small things you need to make sure, just copy and paste, make sure you've got all the spellings right, copy and paste, no mistakes.
It's even worse with, even I don't know if I should put a second N. If you just revert to Finn, right? So is it 2 N's or 1 N? I don't know. But it's it's a love-hate relationship I have with graphics. Like, in full stop, I know everyone, especially on Scotland's social media, have a go at Sky Sports about like getting things wrong all the time. But the love-hate relationship with producers and graphics is a nightmare. Like, no producer likes graphics because it's so hard. Like, you need to at least have always about 9 pairs of eyes across graphics, because sometimes you just never know. You can't rely on one operator to just type something out or copy and paste, or rely on Opta-stats that update stuff automatically for a lot of broadcasters. Just graphics, it's just a pain in the arse. But hey ho, all good. Another one I really liked was Laura actually sent me this on WhatsApp, but Motherwell released their team photo for the season, and really funny that their on loan player Bereth has commented on the page with like a little weird like emoticon because if you look on the back row, he looks like he's been photoshopped into the team photo. I just love that.
It was actually because you'd sent a link, so I was opening the picture to be like, right, where's the obvious Photoshop? And I was like, they've actually done a pretty decent job. I mean, it still looks like he's not quite there, but
yeah,
it's a pretty good job they've done with it. Just while we're on at Motherwell and interesting photographs, there was actually a really funny picture that was kind of doing the rounds on Twitter after the game. It was when Stuart Kettlewell was doing his post-match, but in the Rangers press room, obviously. I'll put a little picture here for those that are watching on YouTube, but it's something to do with the lighting of him sitting there, but there's like a really pale blue light over the whole of Stuart Kettlewell. And it was really funny because my instant thought then when I read the comments, everybody else had the same thought, which was like, he looks like he's been beamed in from Star Wars. You know, like the way that R2-D2 projects.
It's like a hologram type thing.
Hologram.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it was like. So I quite enjoyed that. It's been a funny week.
I'm looking at the photo now. I haven't seen this photo, but I remember thinking about that at the time. Anakin Kettlewell. For all those geeky Star Wars fans like me out there, they might enjoy that. May the Force be with you.
The dogs bark and the caravan passes. The caravan keeps moving. The caravan keeps going.
Right, some news to get stuck into as well now, because probably a relief for a lot of Livingston fans as they have a new owner, a guy called, and apologies, John, I know you're a big listener of the podcast, but apologies for getting your name wrong here. John McIlvogue?
McIlvogue. Yeah.
Terrible. See, this is why I wouldn't be good in graphics. But he's acquired a majority stake in the club and now takes his place on the board, as well as becoming the chief commercial officer. They've also recently appointed a new chief executive, Dave Black, and John Ward also stays in his role of chairman. So, like, there's a little bit of a shake-up, but this has to be, you know, Livingston are a tough club to run and to bring in finances, and Martindale, the manager, has done a great job, even as an assistant manager beforehand. Even he's came out and said this is a huge relief. He can just focus on being a manager for once. It sounds like there's been a lot of bouncing around different jobs. What's your take on this, Finn?
Well, I don't know a huge amount of the ins and outs of it, and it would actually be really good to, I think we'll try and get a Livi supporter on at some point soon, just to go through the finer details of it. Obviously the news is quite fresh, and we don't have a huge amount of insight into the inner workings of it, but I think, yeah, to hear the manager speaking about the relief that he has is a big thing, because I think Martin, he's such a good guy for that club. He's been amazing for Livingston, not just, you know, in his role as manager and what he's done, taking them to cup finals and top 6 finishes and all the rest of it, but he's a Livi man, you know, like he mucks in behind the scenes. I know he's been doing that when money's been tight and there's been cost cutting measures that Martindale's been mucking in with things there too. So yeah, it'll be a huge relief. It will be one of those things where the manager, you know, if he's got to worry about doing things off the pitch, if you can just concentrate on doing it, because I don't think their start to the season's been too bad. But I think now that they've got this space of knowing that the future of the club is secure and the running of the club will be ongoing, it just takes that pressure away.
There's interest growing in Aaron Hickey. There's talk of him being linked with a move. I know this is taking us away from Scottish football, but Aaron Hickey's been an absolute, you know, on a rocket trajectory as a player. You know, obviously leaving Hearts to go to Bologna in the Serie A. He's moved to Brentford, and he's never looked out of place since he's left Hearts. He was excellent when he was there, obviously, too. But he's now, I think, 11 caps for Scotland, and he's only 21. There's talks of him now moving to Arsenal or Liverpool or Man United, and you can see why, because the interest in Scotland's young players right now is so high. I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Hickey if there was a big club like that comes in for him in January. Again, this is something you just hope that if he did make that move, that he's going to get the game time as well. You don't want him to just be providing competition. But it's great news for Scottish football fans, more so for Steve Clarke.
I think it's great news, and you're alluding to the caps that he's now getting for Scotland. Like, most of them have been out of position, where he's been playing in right back, where his natural position is left back. So to have a two-footed player who's, you know, for want of a better expression of the cliche, a modern attacking fullback, you know, overlapping and all the rest of it, he's got so many attributes that would be massively desirable for top end clubs. So it's no surprise that there's that level of club being interested. I think I even saw a rumour that Bayern Munich are keeping tabs on him as well.
Really, yeah.
And they've actually signed a few young players from Scottish teams. I think Barry Hepburn,
Morrison,
the biggest one, but
Morrison from
Celtic
Celtic
as well. Yeah, there's been a few that they've signed, so it's obviously a talent pool that they look at and they trust. So it can only be a good thing for the national team when you've got all of these players playing well for their clubs, but at the highest level as well. As Brentford might not necessarily be the highest level, but I think the Premier League is regarded as one of the best leagues, if not the best league in the world, in terms of talent and pace and professionalism and everything else. So the fact that he's plied his trade there for a couple of seasons with Brentford and looked great, it's no surprise that bigger clubs, I think, are knocking on the door.
Absolutely, and because of that versatility, I think that's what makes him even more attractive to bigger clubs, because I think even his debut for Hearts was in the Scottish Cup final against Celtic. It might have been, and he played right back that day too. It was when he was 16 years old. Like, so good to see his progression amongst many other good Scottish players. I will just promote the podcast, even though you're all listening to it now. If you haven't listened to us before and this is brand new to you, we are across all podcast platforms. We also are on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, TikTok as well. So yeah, hit the subscribe button if you can. That'd be really nice. Tell all your pals. Support is really important for us to keep doing this.
Just on the YouTube side, just to point people towards, most of the time that we'll have guests on the podcast, on the show, we put in a truncated version of the interviews. On YouTube, we tend to have pretty much the full length conversation that we have with people play long form. So whereas it might be like 12-15 minutes in an episode of the podcast, it's sometimes like 20-25 minutes. So if there's ever a guest that you're listening to and you want to hear more of the interview, always check out the YouTube channel. So for example, last week, Motherwell manager Stephen Robinson was just
St Mirren manager guest. Findlay.
Freudian slip.
Love it.
Freudian slip. St Mirren manager Stephen Robinson was on, and he's a terrific guest. And I think we recorded for about 25 minutes with him. So the full length interviews on YouTube, if you want to go and check that out, as we've done with all of our guests from this season so far. So yeah, definitely worth checking out.
Good old plug, Finn. Love that.
Fuentes, right, Lammers picks up, that's nice from Rangers. Matondo with space, deflected it in, and Cyril Dessers celebrates his first Premiership goal for Rangers. There's more than a touch of fortune about it, it just hits off him, but he will take it all day long. Motherwell's good work early on undone. Rangers lead.
Now you would think 3 wins in a week would mean that everything's rosy at your club, but for Rangers it doesn't seem quite right at Ibrox. A shaky performance, shall we say, against Motherwell. One which Michael Beale actually admitted that they got away with one. Motherwell were excellent, just missing that finishing quality. But Finn, do you like Beale's honesty in his post-match? Because you couldn't really disagree with what he's saying, but he's been quite negative towards his team a lot of the time so far this season. He might make a good pundit. Is he making a good manager?
I think he tries to be honest. The interesting thing with Michael Beale's sound bites is that he tends to contradict himself quite a lot. I think he says one thing and then a couple of weeks later he'll say something else. And I think he's a very in the moment kind of person. It's like he's good at analysing something in the moment, but there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of consistency in the way that he's saying something or analysing things over a longer period of time. He said when he was appointed manager, and this is something that's been kind of replayed a lot recently, that he wanted to play with the handbrake off. And the Rangers team should be on the front foot and attacking, and it's just a complete antithesis of what we're witnessing at the moment. I think having spent the guts of £9-10 million on forward players this summer, he's still not sure what his best starting 11 is. It just looks like he's kind of flinging shit at the wall and seeing what's going to stick. I think every single week it feels like there's a different. Well, I haven't tried them up front, so I'll go for it this week. So the starting front three at the weekend were Rabbi Matondo, Scott Wright and Cyril Dessers. Two of them were players that were pretty much at the exit door during the summer. It really confuses me. And I think the most worrying thing for Rangers fans is that there's no discernible signs of progress. There was something really telling actually in the post-match interview by Liam Kelly, and he was talking about his own team, Motherwell, interestingly, but he made this point of, you might lose games, but over the course of a season, if you have a system and you're well drilled and you're playing for each other and you're doing all that, you will get the results. Like, you'll be okay, alluding to the fact of, well, it didn't go our way today, but on another day that could have been points, if not a draw, then certainly a win. And it's just quite telling when you have somebody talking about that with the team you've just played not having any evidential style or cohesion in the way that they're playing. So I think it's more, the results are one thing, but it's the tangible signs that Rangers fans have to work with. There doesn't seem to be much of a plan, if any, and I feel like the clock's kind of ticking for Michael Beale.
It's funny because for a Motherwell fan, that performance was excellent and they should have got more out of the game, so they can go away from that match actually feeling pretty good about themselves, because Motherwell are so well drilled right now and they're on this they were on this amazing away run. You just think that they can just keep going, believing that they have that system and they have the way that they can play. They're just missing that, that kind of winning man up front a little bit, because they have a lot of goals around their team, but that they were just missing that finishing touch during the game, because they were by far the better team. And it's not nice to see a manager go, but when Beale does come in, promising a lot of things, and it's not going to be easy. I do remember Rangers giving Gerrard a long time without winning something, but that was Steven Gerrard. This is Michael Beale, who's not the stature that even Van Bronckhorst. How well could he have done if he was backed as much as Michael Beale has been backed in the transfer market? He's a guy who was literally got them into the Champions League and was saying in his post-match that, look, we've got 2 or 3 players we want to sign, and then nobody came in. Now Beale's been backed with a lot of cash and he's not delivering. It feels like the writing's on the wall, and I don't like seeing anyone lose their job, but you just don't get that time when you're at Celtic or Rangers. Yeah,
and I think you make a really astute point. I think it's just a timing thing. I think it's an unfortunate thing for Van Bronckhorst as opposed to Beale, in that Beale this summer has had the opportunity. I'm going to use the brilliant tabloid expression of a war chest. I love that, a transfer war chest. But he's been backed exclusively, and also there's no fallback on Ross Wilson this time that Gerrard and Giovanni Van Bronckhorst could have laid blame at his door with the director of football. These are all Beale signings, and none of them seem to have any kind of joined up thinking in the way that they're playing in a team. Van Bronckhorst's issue, because obviously he made it to a European final and qualified for the Champions League and won the Scottish Cup as well. His big downfall was the league form. And when you're Rangers or Celtic, that's your bread and butter. You have to be winning the league championship. And there were so many games where Rangers were just really poor on a domestic front, and that's something that Beale did arrest last season, because when he did come in, he was able to turn around the domestic form. But the biggest accusation levied at Beale is that whenever an actual real challenge has come along, so that's games against Celtic or big European matches, he's lost every single one of them, apart from the win against Betis midweek. So that's the first tangible sign that there's been a result against a high level of opposition where it's really counted and he's done the business. So I agree with you. It's not nice to see anybody lose a job, but you just kind of feel like you know how this movie ends.
Yeah, totally. Positive weekend for Aberdeen. Obviously, they lost in the Europa Conference League match against Eintracht Frankfurt. Probably not a terrible result when you think of the scoreline against a team who had won the Europa League not too long ago. 4-0 winners against Ross County, their first league win of the season. An emphatic performance, an excellent one all round from everyone. Duke was getting a lot of plaudits at the weekend, obviously ending his goal drought, a 14-game run without one. A positive performance, one that Aberdeen fans haven't seen for a while, Finn.
Yeah, and I think they'll really be hoping that it kicks their season into gear now, because they've really spluttered and stuttered at the start of this season. Obviously, when Robson came in at the tail end of last year, they had a really good run towards the end of the season and managed to clinch third when it did not look likely for a long time. I think Duke scoring is a welcome sign again for Aberdeen, because he's not had the best of starts this season. So you hope that not just Duke, but and Miofsky as well scoring a double. You know, these players can then kick on. I think also you make a really good point that although it was a defeat against Frankfurt, and this is something I was saying on our WhatsApp chat between me, you and Laura, because at the end of the game I was like, I'm actually surprised. I felt weirdly upbeat seeing Aberdeen had only lost 2-1, and using air quotes there.
In Germany.
But it's by far your most difficult group game. And to go there, and it wasn't just, it wasn't an Alamo, it wasn't backs to the wall, and Frankfurt only scored the 2 goals. Aberdeen competed, and I think in that there'll be a lot of we can mix it. We are a good team. We just need to find our groove again. And man, they did that at the weekend. So yeah, I think they'll be hoping that this really, really kicks their season into gear now and give them confidence going into the future Conference League matches as well.
Lots of positive signs for Aberdeen. I suppose positive signs for Celtic as well, who a lot of people have been saying have been struggling. 3-0 winners away to Livingston. Joe Hart got sent off, his first ever red card, but Celtic still came out 3-0 winners, which is disastrous from a Livingston point of view, because going against 10 men, you should be doing better. I think Martindale said at half-time he was quite happy going in at 1-0 down, knowing the second half to be a man up. Just didn't happen for them at all.
Regardless of the opposition, if you're at home and the opposition goalkeeper is sent off after half an hour and they're down to 10 men, you would expect your team to compete, potentially take a point if you're already a goal down or something like that. And Livi were just lacklustre. But I think fair play to Celtic as well, because sometimes it is difficult playing against 10 men. It's just that batten down the hatches mentality, and Celtic were still able to get 2 more goals for a fairly comfortable win. One of the interesting things at this game was, though, I kind of wanted to make mention of, maybe should have put it in the news section, but did you see at the end of the game there was like a kid had run onto the pitch post-match and was getting tackled by the stewards, and then Brendan Rodgers comes over and picks him up and brings him over to the crowd under his
pushes
arm,
the steward away as well.
Which I think it was a good thing for Rodgers to do, but more on the other side, like, what's the wee guy doing on the pitch anyway? You shouldn't be on there. So I kind of had
we're not fans. We're not fans of this, are we, Finn? Laura is not a fan either. She's very much of the opinion that the football pitch is a stage, and you wouldn't go behind a stage and tackle hug an actor or something like that, because you'd be arrested and sent to prison for a long time. So it's one of those things. Yeah, I kind of fear that social media and videos of fans going onto the pitch, especially young kids, run onto the pitch to meet their idols. It's a nice thing to see. Like, I show things like that to my girlfriend and she's like, oh, isn't that really nice? That's really cute. But there is a danger that, the stewards have a job to do, and the stewards will get a bollocking because they let someone onto the pitch. It's a hard thing to police as well, especially at lower league grounds when you can't hire as more stewards. So they've got a job to do. Secondly, which is probably the primary point, is that the players need to be protected as well. Like, what if something really terrible happens? I know it was only a child, right? I know it was a kid, right? And I think it's it's nice, but it just shouldn't be allowed, and it shouldn't be promoted like it is.
Yeah.
Just that idea that it's like, oh, go on and run in the pitch. You'll get away with it because you're a kid.
Yeah. I completely agree.
It's not the right thing that we should be turning around, and it'll just gain more momentum. It just needs to be stopped, and we'll probably get flack for saying stuff like this, but it's the right thing. It shouldn't happen.
It shouldn't. It's a place of work, and at the end of the day, and it's absolutely fine if players post match want to go over and see the fans and clap the supporters, sign autographs, take selfies, whatever. Absolutely fine. If they don't, you're not entitled to it. And I think I quite like Laura's kind of lofty way of referring to the pitch as a stage, and like you wouldn't invade a stage at a play or a theatre or whatever. And I think sometimes, if it's like last day of the season and a club's preserved their league status, or it's a cup win for the first time in 100 odd years or something like that, I can understand the motivation to pitch invade and want to celebrate, and it's your moment, you're on the ground. But in a way, when at Livi 3-0, when you're the only person going on, and you're right, player safety is paramount. And the annoying thing is as well, so much of the time stewards get flack for being too heavy-handed at one point or not doing enough of a job here. They were doing their job there. Somebody invaded the pitch. They wrestled them to the ground, but they're told by the opposing manager to get off. Like, it's just, I didn't enjoy seeing that. But, fair play to Rodgers as well for taking a wee stand.
Yeah, there's a fine line. There's a way to get it right. But number one, don't run onto the pitch. Just let the players come to you. Right, let's go to Dundee. 2-2. Dundee against Kilmarnock. This was old friends getting back together again. Derek McInnes against his former number 2, Tony Docherty. Tony will probably be quite happy with the draw because they were down to 10 men again. Josh Mulligan was sent off, right? And then the referee was sent to look at it again by VAR. But amazingly, he stuck to his on-field decision. How many times have we asked that of referees, to stick to their on-field decision? Very strange. But there was another weird moment as well, Finn, about McInnes. Practically at full time, he got sent off as well. The ball comes across and he does kick it. So the ball has to have left the field of play. Otherwise, McInnes is entering field of play, and he shouldn't be because the game is still going on. So it's a red card offence. It's just...
You hope common sense prevails, but then there are like these very, very strict rules with these kind of things. There was an interesting case just this week. So Melbourne City women's team have a striker, Hannah Wilkinson, who plays for the New Zealand national team. She scored the opening goal of the Women's World Cup when they beat Norway 1-0. Anyway, they were playing on the most recent international break in Chile, and she was tussling with a Chilean defender. Accidentally, in turning around to talk to the linesperson, hits the linesperson. And now she's kind of staring at, I think it's a 15-match international ban for striking an official, even though it was completely unintentional. And she's kind of turning around and saying, so, the New Zealand national team have appealed the decision. But these are the rules. You can't strike an official. You can't interfere with the ball being in play if you're on the touchline. I find them massively overly officious, and you need some sort of common sense approach to these things. But the rules are rules. So
man,
you had to go.
That's unreal. Because I know, like, if there's like a match like adjudicator or something like that, like watching, they might just say like, you should have done that. But if it's like any job that you're in, if you can justify your decision, you're not wrong, because that's it's just common sense. Come on, use your common sense. Right, Hibs 2-0 against St Johnstone. First home win. Well, he's unbeaten now, Nick Montgomery, the man from Yorkshire who's came from Australia. But there was also a big story here in this game. 2 debuts for 2 young Scots. Rory Whittaker from Hibs. I love it when they have to put the days in their age. So 16 years, 44 days. And St Johnstone's Franz Franzak, 16 years and 38 days. Loads of things going on, but a happy day for Hibs.
Yeah, it was Lewis Miller getting one of the goals as well, who of course was playing under Nick Montgomery at Central Coast Mariners. So it was a good day for them as well. I was making this point a couple of weeks ago when Nick Montgomery was all but assured of coming in as the new Hibs manager, that he's got a very good demonstrable track record of bringing through young players, and it's something that you kind of have to do a lot in the Australian leagues, is rely on your youth squad and promote young players through, and there's some great talent coming through. So it was good to see that he's looks like he's going to be continuing that at Hibs as well and giving youth a chance. And there's by all accounts, I think Rory Whittaker's quite a prodigious talent, so it'll be good to see what happens coming through. I do really enjoy when you see the years plus the days, because it kind of feels like, you know, when you get a kid written in by a letter and it's like, you know, little Jimmy Sanders 9 3/4 or something like that. It's always like something like that. But Fran Franchak as well, great to see him coming in. He actually beats Stevie May now as the youngest player to come on for St Johnstone. I think by 2 days. I think Stevie May made his debut when he was 16 years and 40 days, and we've got Fran Franchak at 16 years 38 days. So
wow,
one to watch. Maybe he'll be sporting a ponytail in the days to come.
Maybe. Well, I do know that Stephen McLean has obviously put a few young lads out on loan, but he said before the season began that Fran is staying, that he wants to work with him, which is really great to hear from, you know, your senior manager looking to give youth an opportunity. I mean, it's probably the only bright light coming out of St Johnstone right now. Yeah. It's not looking too good for St Johnstone fans. It's not looking good for Hearts fans as well at the moment. St Mirren 1-0 winners, and St Mirren obviously doing so well under Stephen Robinson. They're only 2 points behind Celtic. They're still unbeaten, but Hearts have dropped to 6th, I think. They dropped down the table. There's a lot of unrest coming out of Hearts because of the whole manager situation. You know, Naismith being given the job, then he didn't kind of have the job, but he totally had the job. Now he's got the job again. And looking at the stats, Finn, it's mad, really, like how this Hearts team isn't maybe doing better. But do you think it's the players on the pitch, or do you think there's a lack of communication from the dugout?
It's really interesting because I think there seem to be a lot of parallels, I think, with the same situation that we touched on with Rangers in the opening game of this section. I think they both seem to be teams that might have coaches in the role that aren't necessarily suited to it or ready for the level of job that they've got. By all accounts, I think Hearts don't really seem to have a real sense of cohesion on the pitch, a real prominent sense of style. And it's one of those things, I know there were issues with under Robbie Nielsen, but we said at the time as well, it seemed like a peculiar decision to bin off a manager that had been relatively stable and might not play the most exciting football, but it you know, there was a style and there was a formation to the way that they played. I can't see how it can't have a bit of unrest when you've got this weird kind of will they won't they bouncing between managers. Oh, it's the coach. Oh no, it's the manager. And it's, you know, it's a weird thing. They're dominating games and possessions, but they're not converting chances. And it seems like just such an about turn from last season. I do wonder how much longer Stephen Naismith will be given that, you know, the whole reason for sacking Nielsen was, you know, well, we might not finish third football now. And it was and terrible results to back it up as well. Hearts have just been rubbish. But on the flip side, as you say, it's no surprise that St Mirren, you know, took another 3 points, because they've just been, they are so well organised. Again, we talked about this with Motherwell. They are so well organised and well drilled, and you feel like all the players are playing for each other. There's a cohesion there, and it was quite interesting because it was a complete reversal of the goal from last week, which was Strain crossing for Tanser to score. Yeah. This week it was Tanser's ball into the box, and Strain was the one putting it in the back of the net. But yeah, they seem to be going from strength to strength. There was a brilliant article, newspaper article this week with Mark O'Hara. And he was talking about how there is such a positive mentality that St Mirren are just like, look, we're not here to make up the numbers of the top six. We're actually pushing ourselves to be like, what is the best we can go for? We want to be pushing towards cup finals, towards the top end of the table and all of that kind of stuff. And I'd be like, that's brilliant to have your captain doing that, and he leads by example so well, Mark O'Hara. So going for Central. And the crowd, I think, as well, was incredible at St Mirren Park at the weekend.
I think that was their 10th highest crowd since they opened St Mirren Park. So it's, amazing. I mean, there's so much excitement around the place, and when you guys spoke to Stephen Robertson last week, you can understand why the fans are so excited, because there's a real progressiveness on the pitch as well as there is off it as well, which is really good. The one other note I would add about Hearts is I just have this feeling that they might be in a little bit of a moment that Aberdeen were in at the start of the season. I just feel they've got the squad that's capable to do it, and they did have a lot of opportunities in this game. So you kind of think that, well, maybe it might just click and they might go on a run. But like you said, if they don't finish third, it's like managing Celtic and Rangers. If you're not going to finish first, do you get the sack or do you not? It's a stick or twist situation. I think Hearts should probably stick with it for now, but we'll see. Look, we're going to round up the other leagues as well now, Finn, and we're going to start with Inverness, because they could have a new manager.
Big men are up from the back. El Mahoney right foot, whips it. Oh, jeez, peeps, man.
Dundee United jumped back to the top of the Scottish Championship of the weekend after Wraith Rovers' defeat to Airdrielona, and Jordan Tilson's late winner at Inverness, despite United being down to 10 men. It would have been a valuable point for the managerless Inverness, who parted ways with Billy Dodds. So what next for the Highlanders? Joining us to talk about the future of the club is Andrew Young from Inverness Caledonian Thistle fan podcast, the Wyness Shuffle. Now, Andrew, did I say that right? Wyness Shuffle.
You did, that's perfect, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Not at all.
Look, it's always a shame to see a manager go, especially someone who's fairly liked in Scottish football, unless you're not a fan. But Billy Dodds, just sum up his time in charge of Inverness. Was it the right time to part ways?
Yeah, I think it was definitely the right time to part ways, because I just didn't see him pulling it back this season. His kind of record overall as part of Caledonian Thistle manager has been kind of streaky. That's probably the best way of characterising it. He'd have these periods where he'd go on decent winning runs, and then he'd have these long periods where the club just kind of went into these slumps. And although there were mitigating factors like injuries and so on and so forth, there were games that he was losing and games where the team just wasn't performing, where you thought he probably could have done something to turn around games we shouldn't have been losing under any circumstances, injuries or no injuries. So this was the thing, he didn't really convince as a manager who could consistently get good dominating performances out of teams. And like in the last 2 seasons, he sort of saved himself by kind of going on these really good runs towards the end of seasons, which were kind of a bit too reliant, I think, on kind of short-term loan players, Rhys McAleer and Logan Chalmers 2 seasons ago, and then the boy Henderson and Dan Mackay to some extent last season. So there was always a sense in which it was kind of pulling things out of the fire. And I think for me, the reason this season that you felt it was time for him to go is after that really terrible start. When he was asked about, how they were going to turn it around, he kind of went, well, I know these boys are capable of going in good runs. We've shown it in the past. And he didn't take into account the fact that we'd lost 2, arguably 4 of our best players from last season. Robbie Dees and Scott Allardyce had been the backbone of the team for the last 2 seasons, 3 seasons. Henderson, Mackay were kind of like match winners last season as well. We don't have any of those. So there's no guarantee at all that this particular squad of players could go on these kind of like long winning runs that he's talking about. So it felt like he was really clutching at straws. So yeah, I think it was time for him to go. I think he maybe came in for a little bit too much criticism. The people just wrote him off and said that he was completely useless. And I don't think that's fair. But I think he was, he was kind of streaky. And I think this season was just a season too far for him.
Obviously, we're recording this on Monday night, and it's probably been a fun Monday for Inverness fans. Because there's been a lot of interest as to who the new manager might be. And there's a press conference called for Tuesday morning, probably about the time this podcast goes live. But it looks like there's going to be a new manager at the helm. And we understand it's going to be Duncan Ferguson, that's going to be in the dugout. What's your take on that?
I'm pretty blown away, to be honest. I mean, my WhatsApp has been kind of going haywire all night, and the last couple of days, really, all the speculation, and there seem to be different favourites every hour or so. At one stage, yesterday, I think it was Imrie still on the picture yesterday, and then Davin O'Day, who seemed to be the club's favoured choice, that was rumoured. Then he was suddenly reported to have dropped out. And then I think Scott Brown was also another name, and that was quite intriguing, obviously. And then I think it was like literally 20 minutes ago, 9 o'clock, suddenly it was just like, we know who it is, and it's Duncan Ferguson. And I just had no idea where it came from. It's jaw-dropping. I kind of almost wish it hadn't been leaked tonight, just to see what the impact at the press conference would have been tomorrow if they'd actually managed to keep it completely secret. I mean, right, he's obviously applied for it. Surely they're not going to go and sort of seek him out of all the names. So he's obviously put his hat in the ring, and when they saw it, they probably couldn't not give him an interview. And I assume he's impressed at interview. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's a huge gamble. He said one managerial job. Forest Green, I think he won his first of 18 games and didn't win a single one after that, as far as I know. I mean, admittedly, they were struggling at the time really badly, but then we're struggling, So, kind of like, is it the same sort of thing? You're pulling someone in to try and turn around a team that's kind of in the doldrums, and there's no guarantee he can do that. I suppose the positives are he's worked with young players at Everton. And, he's probably going to have to work with some of our young players, and we do have good young players coming through. So that might be something. He's such a big name that it's probably going to be a pool for players when we are finally in a position to sign any, although I have no idea if he's going to have any budget. Another thing actually I've heard is that I think Gary Boland is coming in as his assistant manager. And Gary Boland's, obviously... Well, that's what I've heard, yeah. Okay. And Gary Boland apparently is... Well, he has got plenty of experience in the lower leagues. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember what his last job was, but, he's bumped around these, the divisions for years, and he's obviously got connections in Scottish football. So that's something. I mean, that's something about Ferguson. I mean, what's he, 25 years in England? I don't know what his connections in Scotland are like. So, I'm really intrigued. I'm kind of excited. I'm also absolutely terrified. It could be an absolute disaster. I think, he's more of a gamble than say Kevin Thompson, who's another name that's been mentioned, would have been. He's more of a gamble, I think, even than Scott Brown would have been, because Brown did have some decent spells at Fleetwood. Someone like Ian McCall would have been someone with experience. I think Ferguson's a much bigger gamble than all of those. But, fair play. We've kind of kept it interesting anyway.
Is it potentially something that, because it seems like a bit of a change of pace, I would say, from Caley Thistle in terms of a managerial appointment. Do you think it's maybe something that is needed to kind of freshen things up? Because looking at, you don't tend to be a club that go through managers too quickly. And the last couple of managers, like Billy Dodds and John Robertson, in terms of personality and background and pedigree and the way that they kind of operate, seem relatively similar. And, they're not flashy characters. They're, very good professionals. They're quite steady. And Duncan Ferguson just seems to be quite a departure from that kind of thing. But do you think that's the kind of thing that might actually ignite the club a little and freshen things up?
Possibly. I mean, I think it'll probably attract some fans in for the sort of the circus type factor. We know what's going on here, sort of thing. So I think it'll have a bit of that. I mean, that sort of thing only gets you so far. Yeah. If he's not successful, people will disappear pretty quickly. And that's I don't want to prejudge him. He might well be successful. So I see what you're saying, but whether that justifies the gamble, I mean, I suppose if there's any precedent for it, because think about previous managers. Obviously, you missed Neil McCann was in there temporarily. He's another one that's kind of like basically all these people you'll find if they're not in a managerial job, they're going to be on the couch in Sports Sound of a Saturday afternoon. John Hughes is the same, although Hughes obviously was great for us for a couple of seasons. But he's another one that kind of fits that profile to some extent. And the one kind of outlier there would be Richie Foran, but then that was a cheap option. So the last time we did anything that maybe approaches this would have been Terry Butcher. Very big name, very big personality. But Butcher did have quite a pedigree in Scottish football, and I actually had a couple of good seasons with Motherwell, so I don't think it was the same sort of gamble. So it might, I think in terms of shaking things up, and I think that our chief executive is probably not averse to trying to shake things up and do things like that. But it's we'll see.
I would really have liked to have sat in that meeting, that interview, whether or not he was impressive or intimidating, just to see how he comes across. Because I think he is a good character to have back in Scottish football. Just quickly, the club's been fairly honest with its financial struggles in recent seasons. Are you happy with how the club's being run at the moment? Do you think there's anything more to worry about?
I really don't know. I mean, I think, there's definitely things that the club could be doing better. There's no question about that. Communication with the supporters is really poor. Some of the treatment, the way that players have, departing players have kind of reported the way they've been let go, that just is a really bad look for the club. The local marketing of the club, I think, is really poor. We've got next to no presence in the city centre, and even when kind of volunteer fans, our fans try and volunteer to do things like that, they're not really, offers aren't being kind of engaged with, and so on and so forth. And then every couple of months you might get this overlong, very defensive kind of statement talking about how well things are going, and then they go quiet again. So I think communication is really poor. In terms of what they're doing financially, I think that's very hard to kind of... The board comes in for normal criticism, but I think it's very hard really to know what more they can be doing, because the crowds aren't great. They need to be getting income streams from somewhere locally. They claim to be trying to do that, but they obviously don't want to kind of go into too much detail about how they're trying to do that. And I think it's a case of be careful what you wish for, because if, say Ross Morrison, the chairman, decided to walk away, if Gardner gets forced out, then do we know if there's someone better or someone more able to kind of tap into those income streams waiting in the wings? I don't know. So it doesn't feel like it's being terribly well run at the moment, but I also think that it's incredibly difficult for any club of our size to make money, especially when the crowds are as low as they are at the moment. So it's really, really hard to answer that with any great authority.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the new manager does create a bit more of a buzz around the place. I know he tried to kind of create a closer connection in Nailsworth, although it's not very hard in Forest Green. There's only about 5,000 people in Nailsworth. But the smallest football league club ever, I think. Pretty
even smaller than Ross County. That's
well, this is it. But I mean, the thing is, Inverness is a beautiful place. So I mean, even to play your football around that area is a pretty. I think someone like Duncan Ferguson will get it.
We can't be having that, mate. You better get your finger out, all right, and make sure that you get the results.
So interesting times at Inverness, Finn, but can you just tell me what else has been happening in the Championship over the weekend?
Yeah. So Dunfermline have moved up to 4th. They had a pretty comfortable win over Morton. James McPake, friend of the show, said it was their best performance since he's been in charge, which is some praise, because they were fantastic in League One last season. Wraith actually lost their first game of the season as well, 1-0 to Airdrie, and I'm sure people will have seen the goal through the SPFL thing. It was astonishing. 26 passes. It was Callum Gallagher that scored in the end. 26 passes. I think some people were living that most of them are in the defensive half. I think 22 of them or whatever. 22 of them were in their own half. But it's really encouraging to see, because Rhys McCabe's quite a young manager and he did such a brilliant job in getting Airdrie up through the playoffs last season into the Championship, and they're holding their own there. And it's really nice to see that type of football where they were patient in possession, but it was quick passing as well, and they were trying to just very quickly move, and they eventually build after 20 or so passes into a position where they can break through the line, go for it, and Callum Gallagher puts it away. So that was fantastic to see. As ever, it's the best league in the country. Love the Championship.
Well, League One, it was a 5-star performance from Falkirk to add all the Fs. Beat Kelty Hearts 5-1. Unbeaten start for them, and it's now 5 straight wins as well for Falkirk to keep on adding those Fs. Hamilton, though, are kind of keeping up with them as kind of an early indicator. You would think that they are going to be the two teams to fight it out for the title. A 2-horse race, shall we call it. But the Ackies saw off Queen of the South 2-1 in Dumfries, the absolute... Edinburgh City, they almost secured their first win of the season but their own player, Jack Wilkie, scored an own goal in the 90th minute. So
Disaster.
yeah, they shared the spoils with Cove Rangers. They did get their first point, but they're still 5 points from Cove at the bottom of the table, so it's not good reading for Edinburgh City fans. What about League Two, Finn? Finishes off.
Well, Clyde finally picked up their first win of the campaign, 2-1 over 9th place Elgin, so they will be hoping that can be a springboard to a bit of form now, because they've looked pretty desperate at the start of the season. Stenhousemuir as well beat Bonnyrigg 1-0. That's 3 wins on the bounce now for Stenny, and they're at the top of the table. Peterhead are just a point behind. They beat Dumbarton by the same scoreline, 1-0. But Stenny looking pretty formidable at the start of this season.
Well, thanks a lot, Finn. That was fun. We're finished for another podcast. We'll be back next week. Time to go and listen to something else now. Bye.